city to try and make a point. It didn't work, though, because the backlash of this community as we hold national, state, and local politicians accountable will be the only point that will be made. Last night, Democratic presidential candidate Beto O'Rourke, who used to represent El Paso in Congress, joined hundreds of residents for a silent march and vigil in honor of the victims.
As you well know, but it bears repeating so the rest of the world knows this, he was not from El Paso, Texas. He was from half a state away, bringing that fear, bringing that anger, bringing that hatred, and bringing that racism.
And at 10 o'clock Eastern Time, President Trump is expected to speak out from the White House addressing these two mass shooting incidents in Texas and Ohio. Back to you.
Morning. Jonathan Seri, thank you very much. The President of the United States is going to be addressing the nation 2 hours from right now. Yesterday, he did say that we have to get it stopped. This has been going on for years and years, and he suggested a lot of things are in the works. That's what he said yesterday. This morning, we have a better idea of what he might be thinking about, because about an hour ago, he sent out this tweet.
He said, "We cannot let those killed in El Paso, Texas, and Dayton, Ohio, die in vain. Likewise, for those so seriously wounded, we can never forget them and those many who came before them. Republicans and Democrats must come together and get strong background checks. Perhaps marrying this legislation with desperately needed immigration reform, we must have something good, if not great, come out of these two tragic events."
It'll be very interesting to hear what the president has to say in a couple of hours, because in moments like this, it's quite easy to finger point or play the name game or jump at big federal overarching solutions that some folks think would solve the problem. When we've had experts on the show all morning, ultimately this comes down to individuals, it comes down to souls, it comes down to families and neighbors and communities and mental health and the games we play and the people we interact with in person and on social media that send people into spirals or into dark places. And how much can the federal government ultimately monitor that? How do people get committed if they are found to be mentally ill? You add all of that together, it's not easy enough just to blame the weapon, blame the instrument. In this case, humans are pulling the trigger, and how do you address that?
Well, and we had a forensic psychologist on about a half an hour ago, and he was talking about how dissimilar these two things were because of the two dissimilar shooters. But at the same time, looking at the president's tweet, it sounds like he's going to be addressing background checks. Would a background check have prevented the Dayton shooter from getting a gun? Because it was revealed, and we've talked about it this morning, in high school he drew up a hit list. People he'd like to kill. He scrawled it on the bathroom wall. Chris Mohandi, that psychologist I'm talking about, says the laws on the books right now do not make it easy to enforce this. Watch.
It causes us to rethink, how do we contain people like this? The problem with a lot of our laws is that unless somebody is imminently dangerous, they cannot be hospitalized. And I think there needs to be some provision for people like this to be able to monitor them with a greater degree of control and be able to kind of structure up their lives a little differently than we've been able to do. It's very challenging to deal with these kinds of thoughts and ideas. And it takes a lot of thinking and a lot of systemic thinking, I believe, to be able to manage these kinds of individuals.
A few readings about some of these stories. There was a mom, she's 25 years old, in Walmart down in El Paso. She was shopping in a Walmart, which we all do, shopping for back-to-school supplies for her 3 kids, or for, I guess, the older kids. She was holding her 2-year-old son, and she shot, and her family says that she was shielding him. She fell on top of him. He ended up breaking some bones. She was killed. Her husband was killed. So these 3 kids are going to be raised without their parents. Another guy was at the self-checkout line. His wife was in the bathroom. And she comes out and it's chaos, and she wondered what happened to her husband. And then she learns later that he was one of the ones killed.
It's unbelievable. And, you know, laws have consequences and unintended consequences. I think, Alina, my own experience of veterans who are dealing with post-traumatic stress, sometimes they're fearful to talk about that because they could lose their Second Amendment right based on, are they stable, are not they stable? Or they say, hey, I fought for the right to defend myself. And that doesn't pertain to this case, but good people with good intentions can box people out for their rights. Same thing with the facility in El Paso. We're hearing reports that the mall there and the Walmart were gun-free zones. Right. The best of intentions there to keep guns out.
It's gun-free, even though they sell guns at Walmart?
In that particular case, I'd have to look at the details of that Walmart. But the reports are that even though it's an open carry state, stores themselves can make decisions about whether you can carry in or not. Did the shooter take advantage? We don't know. The best intentions in laws don't always mean you stop these shootings from happening.
Indeed. So 2 mass shootings in 13 hours, 29 people were murdered. Meanwhile, it sounds like there was a potential copycat, at least the threat of it. Over the weekend, down about 10 miles from Tampa, some guy called the Walmart store and said, "I'm on my way and I'm armed." And the headlines out of that area are that he was threatening to shoot up the Walmart.
And his mom works there.
Yeah, so the cops acted quickly. They were able to bust him. Unclear if he actually had any weapons. He's been charged for false reporting of using a firearm in a violent manner.
It's interesting.
And the sheriff down there had this observation about this.
He was intrigued over the shootings over the past couple of days. After the events over the last week, we all fear for our safety to begin with. So to have an individual who, for whatever reason, wants to be a copycat or wants to instill fear in people, for whatever that motive may be, is disturbing. There's going to be a zero tolerance in Hillsborough County for anyone who seeks to instill fear in our residents.
In that case, it was interesting that the guy called ahead and said, "I'm coming to shoot up the Walmart," because they had an opportunity to call the law enforcement officers, and they were able to stop him, almost like he wanted to get caught. But in the Dayton, Ohio situation, we had that psychologist on who said, if you have a mental illness, it is treatable. It's hard to treat, lots of therapy, but you can treat it. But this kid, apparently in high school, he had that kill list that he wrote on the wall in the bathroom and a rape list of the girls. And the school had to be on lockdown, and he was suspended. I'm surprised he wasn't expelled, but he was suspended. And some of his classmates said that he was glorified violence, unpleasant person, was not bullied. Don't let him fool you. The guy, the suspect, on his Twitter page, it says, "I'm going to hell. I'm not coming back." And he praises Satan. So in a situation like that, you get the child help, right? And I don't know, maybe he did have help. Maybe he wasn't one of the ones that could be cured.
Yeah.
But this is a bad kid. I mean, you know, lots of kids get in trouble in high school. But when your kid is a kill list, a rape list, get them help.
Well, you have the combination of desensitization to these types of things, video games, media, movies, what you see, so violence becomes something that's more familiar. And then you have the glorification. And wall-to-wall media coverage. Now, we intentionally don't use the name, don't use the image, don't give this guy any more fame than he wants. But it's when you see it, and kids that are disenchanted or looking for glory, try to be a copycat. We had Dan Bongino on the program earlier talking about how tough it is to address that. Listen.
This copycat phenomenon is a very real thing. I mean, obviously, but we're in a real conundrum here, Stephen. What do? It's news. You obviously have to cover it on these networks. It's devastating news, but it's news nonetheless that people are entitled to hear the details about. But, you know, we can't be ignorant here and pretend it's not a legitimate problem that some other people with severe psychological disturbances and problems beyond our capacity to explain in simple news appearances will find some sick inspiration in this.
Meanwhile, the chief of staff for the president, Mick Mulvaney, was on one of the Sunday chat shows, and he was responding to a number of Democrats who said that President Trump has a lot to do with what happened down in El Paso.
Almost all of them, Steve, said that.
Yeah. Anyway, he says that's not fair because the El Paso shooter posted online he had been expressing those sentiments long before Donald Trump was ever president of the United States.
You can't blame an administration. You know who's responsible? The shooter.
That's right. That would be like blaming the shooter of the congressional baseball game, blaming Bernie Sanders for that shooting, which no responsible person would do in the era of political rhetoric and political differences that we have. It's a whole nother thing to do a heinous act like this.
Yeah, Trey Gowdy, former congressman from South Carolina, he reacted to the shootings and the political fallout. Listen to this.
The right to life is the most fundamental, basic, primary right that we have. It is the right from which all other rights emanate. It doesn't matter if you have a right to a lawyer if you're dead. It doesn't matter if you have the right to free speech if you're dead. It doesn't matter if you have the right to keep and bear arms if you're dead. So on a personal level, I'm willing to subrogate any of my other rights to avoid another Sandy Hook, another Pulse nightclub, another day like we had yesterday. but I'm out of politics and I'm not going back. So the legislators need to look at the laws we have on the books. Are they being enforced? If the answer is yes, and we still have gaps in our laws that need to be fixed, keep in mind, you don't have a single right for which there's not some corresponding responsibility or restriction. Every right you have has a restriction. So if we need more restrictions, then draw the causal scientific link between what you're proposing and what you hope to be the outcome. But just more laws that are not going to be enforced is a panacea, and it's not going to work. Show me a law to prevent the next Sandy Hook and sign me up as a husband and father. Show me the law and sign me up, and I'll give up any other right I have.
So will Washington change anything? It is curious that the President of the United States, in that tweet from an hour ago, said Republicans and Democrats must come together and get strong background checks. Yeah. And then he went on to talk about immigration reform, legislation for that. It'll be interesting to see how he explains that tweet at 10 o'clock this morning.
That's right. I mean, Trey Gowden said, on a personal level, I'm willing to subjugate any of my other rights. I mean, I think I love a lot of what he said. A lot of people would take issue with the idea of subjugating your individual God-given rights through our Constitution and Declaration because somebody misused it. And the laws we should attempt to put in place need to address the issue. That's the point, not make us feel better or get a splashy headline.
Right. I don't think he's saying they're going to take away the rights. There are just simply limits on it. And you know, at times like this, people want things fixed.
Yeah, he's saying, let's do something about it. I'm not a lawmaker anymore, but those who are listening need to do something.
The challenge is we've been on this couch. There are no easy fixes, and Washington doesn't do
There's so many different factors.
Much well.
Well, the president did say all flags at half-staff in government buildings. We have ours at half-staff too, just to remember those individuals and their families.
All right. As we move on, time for some news, and Jillian joins us for that.
That's right. Good morning. Following a number of stories, starting with this, Iran's foreign minister taunting the U.S. hours after Iran announced it seized a third foreign oil tanker. Javad Zarif saying the U.S. cannot form a naval coalition in the Gulf because its allies are too ashamed to join it. He also claims he turned down a meeting with President Trump last month, despite U.S. sanctions and escalating tensions. The latest seized ship is an Iraqi oil tanker accused of smuggling fuel in the Persian Gulf. The granddaughter of Robert F. Kennedy will be laid to rest today. A private service for Saoirse Kennedy Hill will be held at a church near the family's Hyannisport compound in Massachusetts. That is where the 22-year-old was found dead from an apparent overdose. Hill was the niece of Fox News correspondent Doug Kennedy. Trash Collection Day blooms into a treasured friendship. A sanitation worker surprising this little boy with a toy recycling truck in Oklahoma. According to the City of Jenks Facebook page, the child waits outside his home all the time to wave to the trash men and look at their truck. One of the workers recently bought the boy a truck of his own and made his day. Isn't that nice? Look at your headlines.
That's terrific.
That's great.
Back to you.
It'd be a good kid to have in your house. He always wants to take care of the trash. Right? I believe in good household child labor. It's a good set of opportunities for a young child.
At what age did you make your child start taking out the trash?
Any age, as soon as they're capable.
Yeah, we used to say mom and dad only had kids so that they could have extra help around.
It's a benefit.
Because we had a lot of chores.
Man alive.
All right.
Okay, it's 1:15. A Republican congressional candidate being criticized by the left not for her heart. Sarah, thank you for joining us.
Good morning. Thanks for having me on this morning.
You're welcome. So you announced that you were running for Congress a week ago. On day 2, it was Elizabeth Arnold. She's a progressive political activist. She says you're only running. It's all about your looks. What was your response?
Well, that was day 2. Day 1, I actually had the DCCC attack dogs run ads against me for really 2 simple reasons. 1, I know I can flip this seat. And second, I'm Nancy Pelosi's worst nightmare. The day 2, those targeted tweets against me basically saying the only reason I was running for Congress or the only reason I was recruited was based on my appearance. You know, I called these out for what they are. They're sexist. And this isn't just an attack against me. It's not just an attack against Republican women. This is an attack against women everywhere. And, you know, as you said earlier throughout the show, the November 2020 election, this isn't a beauty pageant. The election between Charisse and Sarah will come down to two things and two things only. It's going to come down to policy and leadership. And I would challenge anyone out there to go on my bio, go to sarahforkansas.org, compare my results and my accomplishments to that of Charisse, and you can tell me who's better equipped to lead this congressional district.
Why does this progressive woman think it's okay to go after someone's looks? Is this a double standard? What if this were a Republican going after Kamala Harris?
You know, I think bottom line, we shouldn't put anybody in boxes or labels. You know, I just stepped down as the CEO of the National Down Syndrome Society, and I've been fighting discrimination my entire adult life to those born with an extra 21st chromosome. I've seen those with Down syndrome denied kidney transplants because they have Down syndrome. I've been seeing them denied health insurance. I've seen them denied access to education. And it's just unfortunate that this woman, Arnold, this progressive Democrat from Johnson County, felt that it was okay to go after my appearance and not focus on the issues, the substance, and my track record of getting things done.
I know you're running against Charisse Davids. She is the incumbent Democratic Congresswoman. Tell us why you'd be different than she is and your experience with the National Down Syndrome Society. You were the CEO for 5 years, how you'll use your experience there to go to Washington.
Absolutely. Well, Charisse's very first vote in Congress this cycle was to confirm to elect Nancy Pelosi Speaker. Again, she votes with her 96% of the time, and her ideology and the socialist agenda we see coming out of Washington is just not aligned with this district. You know, as CEO of the National Down Syndrome Society, we have fought for the human rights of people with Down syndrome. And my background and my results and my track record as a CEO, as a disability advocate, and just getting things done is exactly what this congressional district needs. And that's why I look forward to being the next representative from the 3rd Congressional District in Kansas.
All right, Sarah Hart-Weir, we appreciate you being on with us. Thank you. We wish you all the best.
Thank you.
You're welcome.
Thank you.
A former Google worker claims that he was fired for being conservative, and now he's warning the tech giant he wants to take down President Trump in 2020. That worker joins us live, coming up next.
Filing a lawsuit to kick Pedro Pierluisi out of office, days after he was sworn in to replace Ricardo Rossello. There are questions over whether or not the new governor is legitimate or not because the Senate never approved him. Ooh. Meanwhile, Pete?
Yes, a former Google engineer is speaking out against the company's alleged anti-conservative bias and warns it could affect 2020.
Kevin Cernicki worked at the company for 3 years before he was fired. He claims that he was harassed for his conservative views, and now he's concerned that some Google employees might work to make sure that President Trump loses next year.
And Kevin Cernicki joins us right now from Mountain View, California. Kevin, good morning to you.
Morning.
Thanks for having me on.
Okay, you're worried that Google is trying to put their thumb on the scale to beat Donald Trump, right? How do they do that?
Yes, that's absolutely true. When President Trump won in 2016, Google executives went up on stage right away and cried, literally tears streaming down their faces over the fact that President Trump won. They vowed that it would never happen again, and they want to use all of the power and all the resources that they have to control the flow of information to the public and make sure that Trump loses in 2020.
How do they do that?
Well, they have a lot of methods. One thing you might not know is that YouTube censors a lot. Like every 3 months, YouTube deletes about 8 million videos and 3 million accounts. Recently, Google has been getting extremely aggressive in censoring even political advertisements. They just openly do it. It works once or twice. There's no pushback. They continue. They ramp up the censorship. There's bias in the search results. They have released search quality ratings that say they don't want to be returning too many results for extreme sites, and if you're a conservative news outlet, they'll consider you an extreme site. So they have a lot of different ways of putting their thumb on the scale. They also have a huge amount of information about every single voter, every single person in the U.S. They can mine that information. They can use that to kind of build psychological profiles and figure out how to change your mind. They run counter-programming on YouTube. If you visit a conservative video, they will display other content below it.
Kevin, what did they do to you? I know you said you were fired. Tell us why you were fired and what you saw behind the scenes.
Yeah, so basically when I joined Google, I saw a lot of conservative employees being mistreated. They were being harassed, they were being threatened, they were being blacklisted. And I complained to HR about this. I ran it up the chain. I went to a VP and raised my concerns there, and I got a final written warning letter just for raising those concerns. So I took it to the labor board and I said, hey, look, Google is mistreating people. There's a lot of discrimination here. What can we do about it? And eventually they fired me for participating in that labor board investigation.
So Kevin,
I think President Trump needs to know that, sorry, go ahead.
Go ahead, please finish.
I think President Trump needs to know that there are a lot of potential whistleblowers in these companies, and they will speak up if they know that he has their back.
Kevin, here's what Google had to say about your firing. They said, we enforce our workplace policies without regard to political viewpoint. Lively debate is a hallmark of Google's workplace culture. Harassment, discrimination, and the unauthorized access and theft of confidential company information is not. So that's what they claim you did. You say it's because of political views. Why is it so one-sided? I think a lot of Americans would say a booming economy, capitalism is good for a company like Google. Why do they discriminate openly or privately against conservatives and President Trump?
They are very biased. There's bias at every level of the organization. There are a lot of activists working for Google. The group think there is extremely strong, and if you disagree with it just one iota, they will go after you, they'll target you, they'll make you an example. They are very, very intent on making sure that nobody inside Google can speak up against their bias.
Well, as we head toward the 2020 election, what should be done? Should Washington step in? What could be done?
I believe that's the most important thing that can happen. I think lawmakers need to step in. I think government agencies need to step in. They need to review the history of labor complaints against Google and see why were all these cases closed? What is going on in this workplace? The workplace problems are well documented, but nobody has ever stepped in to do anything about them. I think that's a disgrace.
Hey, Kevin, you work at Google, so you're intimately familiar with that organization. But would you say the same things happening at Facebook and Twitter and Instagram and all the other social media sites? Is the same culture pervasive against pro-Trump or conservatives?
I have heard from friends that it is common at the other companies. I've heard that some of the companies are a lot better at keeping it kind of under wraps, keeping it under control. At Google, it's basically the Wild West.
What are you doing now? How are you putting food on the table?
I have another job in Silicon Valley.
All right, good.
Well, thank you very much for coming on and telling us your story. It's scary to think.
No, raising the alarm.
Yeah,
absolutely.
All right.
Thank you.
Scary stuff when you consider there's someone controlling what you see, when you see it, and why you see it, and you don't even know what the code is behind it.
Well, they always say it's the algorithm, but they write the algorithm. And how many times today do you use Google?
Exactly.
This is nothing surprising, though.
No, it isn't. No, it doesn't surprise anybody, but you got to remember it every single day when you consider what you're looking at. All right, well, chilling new video showing people running for their lives as police run toward the shooter, toward the sound of the gunfire. Will address the nation after condemning the deadly shootings in Texas and Ohio.
A total of 29 people killed in the weekend attacks in just 13 hours.
Yeah, Griff Jenkins is in Washington as calls grow now for Congress to head back to the Hill to pass new gun laws. Is that going to happen, Griff?
I don't know, Ainsley, but I'll tell you, it sure feels like the wheels of Washington are turning despite Congress being out for recess. Democrats across the board, from Minority Leader Chuck Schumer to Speaker Nancy Pelosi to the field of 2020 Democratic candidates demanding the Senate return to Washington to tackle gun control and vote on a House bill passed earlier this year. And at least one Republican, Senator Tim Scott, says he's willing to return immediately to talk about gun legislation, as the president, who we will hear from in less than 90 minutes, tweeting this in the last hour. We cannot let those killed in El Paso, Texas and Dayton, Ohio die in vain. Likewise, for those so seriously wounded. We can never forget them and those many who came before them. Republicans and Democrats must come together and get strong background checks, perhaps marrying, he continues, this legislation with desperately needed immigration reform. We must have something good, if not great, come out of these two tragic events. But already, Senator Kirsten Gillibrand is blasting that suggestion.
It's absurd. Why would, again, this is part of the problem. He's linking issue of basic common sense gun reform that we should be going back into the Senate today to vote on, with this issue of immigration, because again, he continues to try to demonize people seeking asylum, people needing our help.
And no indication that McConnell has any plans to call anyone back at this point. In fact, he fractured his shoulder at home over the weekend and is recovering. But the president, who we'll talk to us very soon, does have the authority to call lawmakers back. Under Article 2, Section 3, it would be a move not seen since Harry Truman. We shall find out, but one thing's for sure, something's happening here despite the lawmakers on vacation. Guys?
Griff, thank you very much. Appreciate that on the Insight in Washington, D.C. Well, let's bring in our law enforcement panel as we talk about what's happened in Dayton and El Paso. We've got Blue Lives Matter NYCD founder and NYPD Sergeant Joseph Imperatrice, former Secret Service agent Evie Pampouras, and former Westchester County Police Sergeant Steve Cardian. Gentlemen, lady, thank you very much for being here this morning. So as we look at, I want to break down the response of police. You know, we talked about the amount of time it took in El Paso, which is not amount of time. You're calling and they're responding, no shots fired. But we've seen the dramatic new video this morning out of Dayton of the people running in the other direction and those officers rounding the corner within 30 seconds to engage the gunman. Steve, put us inside the shoes and the mind of those police at that moment.
Well, you'd be surprised how calm that you remain during such an incident like that. They did an amazing job. What they did, they saw the shooter coming towards them, and they lied in wait. And he was target fixated on the people that he was chasing, so he never even saw them, and they took him out. Did a great job.
Evie, is that your experience as well? Because a lot of folks might say, calm. That's the last thing I would feel in a moment like that.
But that's training. You go through the academies, you go through training. You're stimulated. They put you in scenarios where you're under all this stress, and that's the whole point. It's actually called the hermetic effect, where you put somebody under in increments of stress over a period of time, and then you create this resistance so that you're able to get into a scenario like that and respond. You have to think clearly, you have to think tactically, and you have to be able to put your emotions aside and your instincts of fear and self-preservation to move forward in the face of danger.
Absolutely. Joseph, in this instance in Dayton, it was 30 seconds. I mean, they were around the corner, shots are fired, and they're engaged. I would imagine more typically there's a call, which means there's a series of minutes as you're driving to the scene, maybe to get mentally prepared for what you might be facing. Is one more difficult than the other? I mean, your reaction to that response?
We as a nation, first off, have to praise these officers for the way they responded, the professionalism. The problem is when you're in a car, you're going, and you have more time to think. In this situation, when you're around the corner, you're running right to the scene. People are running away, you're running in. You're not thinking about it. Just like Steve said earlier, it's after that you start shaking. The whole point is to preserve human life, no matter where you are in law enforcement, and that's what these officers did. They saved so many lives by the way they acted.
Steve, the thought of, I mean, this shooter had, we don't know exactly what the style of the rifle was, but a long gun, maybe an AR-15, whatever it was. These officers around in the corner with 9mm pistols. Is that something going through their mind? Hey, I might be outgunned at this moment?
No. Shot placement is very key. And he was wearing a vest, so they had very good shot placement, and they were in a position where they were able to go for the vital areas. Only 20% of your body would be an instant kill. Where you would bleed out quickly. But again, great job, and praise for the officers and the way that they reacted, I should say.
Absolutely. Evie, any additional thoughts on, as you dwell on where we go forward and looking at law enforcement's role, anything different as you look at these situations?
I think we're seeing more and more of them, and law enforcement is training to deal with these situations. And, there's so much training that needs to go into, but I think we also need to look at, outside of law enforcement, the American psyche and culture, because there's something happening here that is deep-rooted. Why are we seeing more and more of these? Why are people using these as coping mechanisms? There is something much more deeper and profound that's happening here in the United States amongst us, in which we have to look inward and figure out, why are these happening? Where are we failing as a society, and why are we not teaching people to have better coping skills or dealing with mental health issues or all these other health issues that we're seeing, so that these scenarios don't happen?
Other than a gun. Joe, briefly, we were running out of time. Last word.
Politicians need to stop playing games in regards to the budget. We need more officers out there, higher visibility, and give officers the opportunity to stop this individual before they get to their target.
All of you, well said. Thank you for your service and your time this morning. We appreciate it. All right, Jillian, out to you.
Good morning to you. Good morning to everyone at home. We start with the Fox News alert now. Senator Rand Paul suffering another health emergency. He says stemming from the attack by his neighbor 2 years ago. The senator tweeting, quote, "Unfortunately, I will have to limit my August activities. Part of my lung damaged by the 2017 assault had to be removed by surgery this weekend. The doctors, nurses, and staff at Vanderbilt University Medical Center were great. I should be able to return to the Senate in September." The senator's neighbor, Renee Boucher, served a 30-day sentence for the attack. A baseball fan sent to the hospital after she was hit in the head with a foul ball. Texas Rangers outfielder Willie Calhoun hit a line drive, striking this woman in the forehead. Calhoun was spotted taking a knee while waiting to make sure the woman was okay. No word on her condition. Now, this comes just over 2 months after a 2-year-old girl suffered a fractured skull when she was hit at a Houston Astros game. The Phillies call foul and sue to keep its mascot from becoming a free agent. The team filing a complaint against the company that created the iconic Fanatic, claiming it threatened to terminate the Phillies' rights unless the team agreed to renegotiate a contract from 1984. The Phillies claim that's the year they bought all rights to the Fanatic. That would be devastating to lose the Fanatic in Philly. Let's go outside to Janice Dean right now, where it's a pretty nice morning out there, Janice.
It is a beautiful morning, and look at my friends that came to see us today. Oh my gosh, this is what America needed today. Thank you so much for coming. What is your name, young lady?
Jackson.
And yours?
Corbin.
And yours?
Bray.
And?
Aisley.
Where are you from?
Oklahoma City.
Oklahoma City. Are you guys happy to be here on Fox and Friends?
Yeah.
Are you happy to be here on Fox and Friends? Yeah. Oh, I love it. Let's take a look at the maps real quick. It is a beautiful day here in New York City. We've got temperatures in the low 70s, no humidity. It's gorgeous. 70 right now in Cleveland, 77 in Dallas, 76 in Kansas City. We do have the potential for showers and thunderstorms across the northern plains and the upper Midwest. We have a severe thunderstorm watch in effect, so keep that in mind. We could see some hail, some damaging winds, and isolated tornadoes. And there's a look at your forecast today. Very summer-like across the Gulf Coast and very hot over the southwest. All right. Hi, what's your name?
Hi, my name is Derek Barsotti.
Are you happy to be here?
Yes,
I'm happy
am.
that you're here. All right, say hi to Pete and Ainsley and Steve in the studio, my friends. Woo-hoo! Take a look.
Thank you, Janice. I will receive
people.
all of that on behalf of Steve and Ainsley as well. Janice, thank you very much. All right, well,
up here, talked to the mayor in Dayton, Ohio, so all that's on the offing. On international matters, John Bolton is live in Peru, so a lot to get through this on this Monday. Join Sandra and me in a matter of minutes. See you at the top of the hour, guys. 10 minutes away.
And welcome back. We have some quick headlines for you now. 4 2020 Democrats will speak to America's largest Latino advocacy organization today. Former Vice President Joe Biden and Senators Bernie Sanders, Kamala Harris, and Amy Klobuchar will also hold question and answer sessions at a conference in San Diego. And New York City Mayor Bill de Blasio reportedly ordered his NYPD security detail to help his daughter move. Sources tell the New York Daily News the officers used city vehicles to do it. His daughter was moving from an apartment in Brooklyn to the mayor's mansion last year. Ainsley.
Okay, thank you, Jillian. A loving father and husband taken all too soon. Lieutenant Commander Raymond O'Hare was a Navy test pilot who died when his plane crashed during a training mission in 2000.
His 3 children have grown up without their dad, but have carried on his legacy. And with the help of Folds of Honor, all have been able to chase after their dreams.
And they join us now, Folds of Honor scholarship recipients. We have on the top, on the right, we've got Liz. Then in the center, we have Tom. And on the right, screen left, we have Katie. Along with Folds of Honor and CEO, Major Dan Rooney, and Folds of Honor supporter and country music star, John Rich. Good morning to all of you.
Good morning. Yes.
Major Dan, tell us about the O'Hare family.
You know, it's very close to home. Their dad lost his life flying the exact same airplane that I spent the last 5 days flying in Florida, the T-38. And, you know, I've been watching Fox the last couple days, and first and foremost, thoughts and prayers to all the families out there who are suffering. But the reality is in the military, that happens every day. And that's where Folds of Honor comes in and is able to first and foremost honor the sacrifice by educating the legacy. And the O'Hare family is carrying on an amazing legacy on behalf of their dad and doing great work.
Indeed.
Yeah, Liz, what has it meant to be able to go to school and do so in the name of your father?
It's been absolutely incredible. The opportunity that I've been given to be able to continue my education and try to help others through my degree in science has been awesome, and to know that my dad is remembered through that as well.
John, I know you've been on the program a lot talking about your support for Folds of Honor. Tell us why you got involved in what you're doing.
You know, I think we all say thank you for your service. I think Folds of Honor, though, allows Americans to go to that next step, which is taking care of the families that get left behind. You know, boys and girls, young men and women that get to go to college that otherwise wouldn't be able to go without Folds of Honor. To me, that's the ultimate way to say thank you. I think we all know without our vets in active duty, we don't have a country at all. Right. And so, to me, that's the biggest way you can say thanks.
You know, and so often folks see appeals on television, you know, donate money and we're going to do this with the money. Today, this is kind of unusual because John Rich's Redneck Riviera whiskey, 10% of every bottle goes to Folds of Honor. Right. And one of the people sitting behind you is going to college because of that whiskey.
I know. So, you know, you step out to do something like that, you give back Redneck Riviera, like you said, 10%, and then you get to meet somebody that's actually impacting through the...
Tom is going to college.
Tom's going to college through sales of whiskey, which, by the way, go easy on the whiskey, buddy. But it's pretty great to see teamwork, you know, Folds of Honor and guys like myself and hundreds and thousands of other people supporting it. So here you go. This is on behalf of the Whiskey Son. Do well in school. Study a lot, okay?
That's great.
Proud of this guy. Yeah.
So Tom, I got to read. So you're sitting in front of it is a $5,000 check with your name on it, which you were not expecting today. That's a big check.
Never expected to get a big check before.
Especially from John Rich on live national television. You know, what does it all mean to you to understand the legacy of your father?
It means that, you know, I live every day knowing that he's not here, and I get to carry on his legacy, and he definitely believed in helping other people and in sacrificing for others, and I'm glad that I get to continue that and hopefully have a future in doing that as well.
Sure.
Katie, instant connection with you because I'm from South Carolina. You went to college at Charleston, and you went 4 years. You don't have to pay any debt. I'm sure your mom was so relieved. What was her reaction? Because when your dad died, and she has 3 little ones, she was probably worried about how am I going to put my kids through college?
Yeah, so one of the big struggles of Gold Star family is there is a lot of pressure that gets put onto the one parent who is alive financially, and so there was kind of always this big question mark how we would pay for school, and so Folds of Honor really bridged that financial gap of, you know, we didn't know what we were going to do, and so it really allowed us to leave school debt-free and allowed me to now live and work in New York City, which I otherwise might not have been able to do.
That's right. And John, in addition to 10% of the whiskey going to Folds of Honor, 100% of the proceeds of that song, Shut Up About Politics, is going to Folds of Honor, right?
That's right. So that's made a lot of money, too. If people want to help me by purchasing that, it's easy. RedneckRiviera.com. There's a store locator. We're a nation.